We've officially hit NFL draft season. We have our top 5 quarterbacks. Let's talk about them. In our first official 2023 NFL draft preview, we start where all previews probably are going to start, and that is with the most important position in all of team sports, the quarterback. Just kind of forming this into the Vikings to start. The Vikings, you could say, could potentially be in need of a quarterback, especially with the recent Kirk Cousins news.
Right.
Obviously, there's a couple that I think are going to be a little bit out of reach. I mean, I don't, unless, Kwesi gets ballsy and wants to make a big jump into the top of the first round, which I'm not sure of. But anyway, that's the point of this video, is to kind of go through these draft prospects overall, but also, maybe look at, if the Vikings did get one of these guys, how could they potentially help the roster? But anyway, this draft has a lot of really intriguing prospects. It was hard to pick a firm top 5. I mean, obviously, like the first 3 or 4 were pretty solid, but there's a couple that could have been interchangeable. But overall, I think we put together a pretty good top 5 here.
Yeah, me too. I think there's going to be a little surprise in there to some. So it'll be interesting. Let's jump right into that.
Yeah,
actually.
Yeah, sure. Definitely. But before we do that, I do want to ask everybody, please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like the video. Come join us. Come hang out. We give away Justin Jefferson rookie cards on our live streams. Yeah, that's all I got
no
to
reason
say.
not,
I don't
no
have the
reason
draft
not
this time,
to.
but 78% of you aren't subscribed. So,
and hit the bell too. Get notifications for our videos and our live streams, so you can hop in there and have a chance at winning some cards and have a good time, of course.
Yeah. But anyway,
draft
let's
season,
start
baby.
off.
Let's go.
Quarterback number 5.
Go in here. Quarterback number 5.
Florida quarterback Anthony Richardson. Now, when you look at a guy like Anthony Richardson, the first thing that really jumps out to you is his size. 6'4", 232. And when you watch his tape, watch his highlights, if you want a quarterback that can run the football, this is your guy. Fantastic at that. A lot of it, I don't know if it's as much escapability to try to, keep an eyes downfield and making the big throw. But if you want that dual threat Lamar Jackson type guy, this is your guy. My biggest knock on him, and I think this is the biggest knock on him in general, is the accuracy issues. I was watching his I can't remember who he was playing in the highlight that I watched, but there was a ton of overthrows, a ton of just bad decision making. And I think that is the big knock on him, is just, he's athletic, he has all the intangibles, he does have a big arm, but can he put it all together? And I think that's why this quarterback is he's more of a developmental prospect, but we'll still probably go top 10.
Yeah. Yeah. He is very raw. That's like for sure. I almost wanted to put him at number 4. Something in me wanted to, and I just couldn't because of the overthrows. There's no question that he does that a lot. And obviously, if you can put him behind a quarterback, I know this is a guy that a lot of Vikings fans have been talking about all offseason because, until it sounds like he's starting to make his way up the draft, but it'll be interesting how it goes, how other GMs see, because, he is raw, but his abilities are insane. Like if you watch film on him and highlights of him, he can literally do pretty much everything that you'd want from a quarterback. Like he can escape pressure and extend plays with his arm and his legs, for sure. His legs, like you said, like Lamar Jackson, but he's not just the best. He is actually the best rushing quarterback in this draft, and he's also the strongest armed quarterback in this draft. Those are obviously 2 things that you just don't teach somebody: athleticism and strong arm. So you put those 2, if you can figure out, if someone can grab him and figure out how to figure out like all the stuff in between that, I think you're going to have someone that could be, one of the better players in the NFL in general. Obviously, that's a big task. He isn't the first one to come in with those kind of intangibles, even though you could argue has the most that we've seen coming out since probably Cam Newton, as far as that goes. So I don't know. It's a high risk, high reward type of player, I think. And for the Vikings, like if we were to go snag him up, especially if he fell to us at 23, I don't think he will. And we decided like, hey, this is our guy. I know we're not going to sign Kirk Cousins for 1 extra year. This is the type of guy, you talked about it before you hopped on here, where you kind of wish you had Cousins for just 2 years instead of just the 1 for him to sit behind. You kind of want that 2 years, but my opinion, I don't really want any more than 2 years. So it kind of puts us in a rough spot with that, because this is a guy that you feel like it might take more than 1 year for him to become a full-time starter.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would be pumped just to have that type of talent. And then you just hope we can figure out how to get him.
Yeah, for sure.
To that place or whatever.
And Kevin O'Connell, maybe he could, work his magic with him. And I think the biggest thing you said is raw. A lot of raw potential there. But just kind of look, I've heard a lot of the comparisons, like, Patrick Mahomes too coming out had a lot of that raw potential. People were wondering, would he be able to translate that to the NFL? But Mahomes was still throwing for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. Where this last season, 53% completion, 53 yards, 17 touchdowns, 9 picks. Doesn't necessarily, and that's kind of where a lot of the knocks are. That's because of the accuracy issues.
I know that people say that his NFL. I know a lot of people will say that Will Levis is compared to Josh Allen, but they actually have Anthony Richardson as a comparison to Josh Allen. And actually, as we go here, I do wonder. I should have looked before I hopped on here, but what is Josh Allen? What did he look like when he was in college? I know when he came out of college, he had the big arm running ability.
Right. I think, very similar. Yeah.
But yeah, he overthrows, and that's still his knock today, is overthrowing the ball. He does have some accuracy issues sometimes,
and throwing the ball to Patrick Peterson a couple times.
Right, and I can't imagine. Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine. I'm assuming that Josh Allen was a little bit better, like a little bit more polished than Anthony Richardson was going into this draft, but
obviously
Anthony Richardson is also playing against some of the best colleges in the entire nation, where Josh Allen played for Wyoming and didn't play against that kind of competition. So
yeah, but obviously, but the rushing is there, 654 yards, 9 touchdowns. That's pretty solid there. But yeah, again, it's a lot of untapped potential there, and he is somebody a team would have to draft and work on, which I think is what kind of drops him down into this 5 spot. But yeah, moving forward, number 4 on our list is the guy that Jamie had mentioned a little bit before here.
Will Levis, number 4. Who can possibly be 3, 2, or 1?
Right, exactly. Well, 2 and 1 are pretty straightforward, I think. But yeah, anyway, talking about Will Levis. Now, when me and Jamie first started looking at tape, we kind of had different feelings on Will Levis, and then I point out a highlight video, and I think I made Jamie feel a little bit better about him.
Yeah,
but with a lot of these quarterbacks, mainly these bottom ones. The top ones are, a little bit lower in this range, but the size of this kid, 6'3", 232. This is the guy. A lot of people are saying there is some Josh Allen like potential there, just because he's big kid, big arm. I thought he had really nice touch on his deep balls. Sometimes you feel like maybe he didn't get the ball deep enough. Maybe there wasn't enough strength there. But I think a lot of times when I rewatched some of the highlights, you saw him kind of throwing off awkward platforms. But yeah, man, it's just, and he's good in the pocket. He can escape. He has that, as you saw in the 2022 or 2021 highlights, he can run. He's, kind of likes to take on some contact.
Yeah.
But again, you look at the stats here with him, 2,415 yards, 19 touchdowns, 10 picks. Again, he was playing in the SEC. I believe his stats did take a step down from his 2021 season, but
quite a bit.
But I think this again is a guy you're getting who has he's probably a little bit more polished than an Anthony Richardson.
Oh, for sure. Especially arm talent. There's no question as far as arm talent that he's more polished than Anthony Richardson.
Yeah,
but
I feel like he had pretty good ball placement.
But the thing with him is, like you were talking about, everybody was talking about his running ability. So I started watching game tape. It was a lot from this year. And for whatever reason, I know a lot of people who watch this will know exactly why. Probably I didn't look into it enough myself. But you didn't see him run a lot this season. I think he had technically negative, I'm assuming they add sacks to this, but negative 100 rushing yards this season, when the year before he had 400 yards rushing and 9 touchdowns. This season he had 2, or is it 4? I think he has 4 touchdowns rushing, and then mine is 100. So he just stopped running this year, or just not nearly as enough as he did in years past. Casey was talking about maybe he was just trying to get more accumulated to more NFL type play style, whatever. But that was kind of concerning to me a little bit, just because I want to see that. But his running is fantastic, and it looks exactly like Josh Allen. He's hurdling people, running strong. I love the way he runs. I'm assuming coming into the NFL, you will see more of that run game from him. But my thing was, I just don't. He's someone, he had minus 100 yards, which means he gets sacked quite a bit, and that's something I see. I don't feel like he escapes the pocket a lot, and if he does, maybe it's with his legs, but I feel like he takes a lot of sacks. All the videos I watched, every single time he had pressure, if he didn't get that ball off, it was just a sack, and he had room to escape and make plays with his legs and scramble around the pot or out of the pocket and extend the play with his arm. And that's something I just didn't see from him. And for me, for when I watch quarterbacks, especially this year, like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, all those guys have that ability when the pocket collapse to escape it and get to the, whether you're rolling out from it or whatever, and extending the play with their arms, keeping their eyes downfield. And I feel like that is a very good or huge intangible now in the NFL. And that's something that once we get to Bryce Young, we'll talk about, because he does that way better than anybody else in this draft. But that's just something I don't see from him yet. It just seems like he takes sacks. And, for me, it just reminds me of Kirk Cousins, when you just sit there and take a sack instead of try to roll out and escape the pressure and to extend the play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I feel about Levis in that area. And that's one of the reasons why I wasn't as high as him as some people are. So I just still feel like he's a little bit raw. And obviously his stats diminished significantly this season, which can come from, players, stuff like that. But I don't know.
But I don't know. With me, when I watched those stats, I kind of fell in love. But again,
When you watch the stats,
or when I watched the highlights, I kind of fell in love with him. But I think a lot of people will, and that's why I don't think he makes it out of like the top probably 6 or 7 picks there.
Yeah, he probably doesn't at this point.
But I mean, a little bit of a surprise, but is it that big of a surprise? I'm not sure. Number 3, we did have Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. Obviously, Hendon Hooker had Tennessee near the top of college football. I believe they were ranked number 1 for a while there when they started undefeated, until of course they ran into the buzzsaw that was the two-time repeating national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs.
Mm-hmm.
But just watching the highlights of this guy when he was healthy, first thing that really jumped out to me was the arm. I thought he had a really nice deep ball with good touch. His size 6'4", 218.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of the guys that can do it all. In the games he played in, 3,135 passing yards, 27 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, 123.9 passer rating, 430 rush yards, and 5 touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, I loved his pocket presence, his ability to move. Obviously playing, and that's the thing with the 4 of the 5 quarterbacks are SEC quarterbacks, so they've and one of them is a Big Ten quarterback, so they all played against top tier competition in football this year. And I think that's one of the biggest things, like they're in our top 5 and a lot of people's top 5s, there aren't really any small school guys. I mean, obviously Kentucky's not a big SEC school, but they're still in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just think with the way that Hendon Hooker led this team when he was healthy, I think that shows a lot. Obviously, the injury that happened late in the season didn't help, the ACL tear, which who knows when he's going to be ready. Plus, people are worried about his age. He's 25 years old, but quarterbacks can play into their late 30s now and keep playing well. So, yeah, I'm a big fan. The more that I watched him play,
yeah, I like him a lot. I do want to say right now that when we did this top 5 and put Hendon Hooker here, I am looking at it prior to the ACL. I'm not sure when he's going to be picked, and I don't know if even if we would want to pick him after going off of an ACL injury like that, especially when he's a guy that does do a lot with his legs. But if you took everything, his stats and his highlights and just everything I watched from him prior to that ACL tear, he's my number 3 guy. I know people worried about his age, 25, which I do get. I'd rather have one of these young guys like Anthony Richardson, Stroud, or Bryce Young, who are only 21 years old. But even Will Levis is only a year and a half younger than Hendon Hooker, and no one's really talking about his age that much, I don't think. But no, I like Hendon Hooker. I think it's not just his ability to run, but he just stands so tall in the pocket. You can just see it, everything going around him when you're watching that, the pressure coming, everything's going around him. He's just standing tall in the pocket, doesn't look very like he looks very comfortable, and he just gets that ball off, good arm, all that stuff. Again, just like with Levis, another thing with Hendon Hooker, the difference is, unlike Levis this year, Levis just wasn't really using his legs that much this year. When the pocket collapsed, it seemed like he just took some sacks. Where Hendon Hooker will use his legs to get a first down or whatever. The thing, though, with him is he doesn't use his legs when the pocket collapses. He doesn't use it to get out of the pocket to extend the play with his arm, as well as what I was just talking about with Levis. And that's, like I said, an intangible that I think is important in the NFL nowadays. Like the top quarterbacks in the NFL, they all have that ability to extend plays and improvise when the pocket collapses with their arm, not just their legs. Mm-hmm. So that's something I don't really see from him either. Same with Will Levis, that you do see more with the next two quarterbacks, specifically one of them, which I already said earlier, but we'll just go into it.
But obviously, with another thing with Hendon Hooker, if the Vikings could find a way to get a late second round pick or take him in the third, I wouldn't complain.
I would do it 100%. I'm at this point. I like him enough. There's no question in my mind if he's there in the third round. We have a third round pick. I don't think he will be, but maybe the injury. If he's there in the third round, you take him. I'm there 100%. You take him. You have Kirk Cousins on for another year. He has time to recover from that ACL, obviously, and even still probably be healthy enough to. I don't know if they would put him as a second quarterback. Probably not if that was the case, but you give him time to sit behind Kirk Cousins and get healthy and stuff. And I also want to say is if we did do that and his ACL seemed to be significant enough to where you're not sure about him long term, I would still say you go into that next draft looking for your quarterback.
Yep, for sure. Moving on to our number two, and I feel like our number two pretty much line up with the consensus 1-2 kind of throughout the NFL. Ohio State's CJ Stroud. Now, with this one, I really had to tell myself, scout the player, not the helmet, because I am not a fan of Ohio State quarterbacks because I just can't remember the last one that's came into the league and really did much. But, I mean, CJ Stroud, when you watch him play, he just looks different. I thought that he was the most mechanically sound. Gets his feet planted nicely, nice release, good deep ball, good intermediate, good very, he can make any throw on the field. He can move around. But that's the biggest question. I don't think he didn't have to scramble much because Ohio State just has such a stacked football team, and that's what you got to wonder is. I mean, and you could ask that about him and our number one guy as well, but without. I just can't think. Has CJ Stroud played without at least a top two or two potentially first round pick wide receivers, if not three, in his career? I mean, last year, obviously he had the two guys this year, Smith-Njigba and Harrison Jr., plus Olave and Garrett Wilson. So this guy Ohio State's known for their solid offensive lines. So will he be able to do it without the supporting cast? Yeah. And that's again, with Ohio State quarterbacks, that's what kind of remains to be seen. But everything else, 6'3", 215, 41 touchdowns, 6 picks, can run the ball, can scramble. Everything else you love. I loved watching him in the highlights that I watched of him.
Yeah, I really did like him. Obviously 41 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Exactly everything you said about the wide receivers. I mean, you can't get better wide receivers in your college career. I think Garrett Wilson, top 10 pick. Chris Olave, number 12 or 11 or something like that, right before our pick that we traded back to the Lions. So I mean, and then Marvin Harrison Jr. I have no doubt if he's anything like he was this year, he's probably going to be a top 5 pick going into the next season. So he's had a crazy talent. I would have to say I'm not as big on Stroud as some people. When I watch his tape, I don't know. There just seemed to be his arm talent's definitely there. His ball placement is definitely there. I do feel like when I watch him, he had some missed throws. I forgot which game, one of the games that I watched of his. I think it was against Michigan. Right? Yeah. I think it was against Michigan. And he just had some kind of bad throws, I felt like. Kind of looked a little rattled when he got out of the pocket a little bit. And that's another thing, like I said, about the last 2 quarterbacks, something I didn't see from him enough, which I was hoping I was going to, because I didn't watch CJ Stroud a ton during his college career, other than like, the highlights that might pop up on ESPN. And he's another guy that I don't really see him improvising and getting out of the pocket to extend plays, also
really
with his
though.
arms or his legs. He's someone that definitely, he has the ability, he's athletic, but he doesn't really try to move the ball down the field with his legs. When I watch the highlight, there's times where it's like, hey, you should probably run here, and he didn't. Which, at least he can, which I feel good about that, unlike our quarterback right now who doesn't seem like he can, at least, or there's times where he probably should. I don't know. Once in a while he will. Anyways, I can't stop talking about Kirk Cousins. But yeah, overall though, obviously 41 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 65.9 passing percentage, 3,000, almost 4,000 yards, and a passer rating of 125 is pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. And he's only 21 years old. That's huge.
And he's only 21 years old.
But I know a lot of people said he started off slow, then really kind of came on near the end. And then obviously, the national title game, their first half wasn't great, but in the second half, he came out and brought them back to at least within a field goal to go to the national championship game in the semifinals. Mm-hmm. So he's shown he can do it in the big moments when he needs
and that
to.
Actually brings me back to Hendon Hooker, because we were just talking about, like, he can win. Obviously he can win. Obviously he's playing a game with Ohio State, same with Bryce Young with Alabama. But Hendon Hooker's game I was super impressed against Hendon Hooker's game against Alabama, and right at the end of the game they were down by like 7 points. I think Hendon Hooker actually threw an interception that bounced off his player. It was a really nice throw, bounced off his player's hands into the end zone interception. But then I think it was 3-0 by Alabama, and then Hendon Hooker brought them down to throw a touchdown. The Vols defense stopped Alabama again, and Hendon Hooker put him in the position to win by a field goal. That is a winning type quarterback. That's the mental thing that we talk about with Kirk Cousins, and obviously is extremely important. The thing that separates Tom Brady from every other quarterback in NFL history is you want a guy that knows how to win, especially in those kind of big games. That's what I saw from Hendon Hooker. That is the kind of stuff you see from Stroud in Ohio State, but you see that from every like you said, you see that from every quarterback that comes out of Ohio State, and it doesn't seem to go into the NFL, even though that doesn't make a lot of logical sense. But it's one of those weird things that just, there's a pattern there. I think Stroud's going to break it. I do think he's really talented, and at the end of the day, it's about winning. So
yep, for sure. But yeah. Anyway, so our number one guy, consensus number one guy around, if you listen to most people, Bryce Young. Jamie, I know you said you thought he was far and away the best quarterback. I'll let you take this one away.
Yeah. I thought he was far and away the best. I know some people don't have. I mean, some people have Levis higher than anybody. Obviously, the two that most people talk about is Stroud or Bryce Young. I think for sure Bryce Young is going to be the first quarterback taken. Obviously, he's small, 194 pounds and like 6 foot, probably on a good day. My guess is they gave him an inch or something like that. But man, his improvising is just something you can't teach. I think you do get better. Like the more comfortable, maybe you get better. There's some quarterbacks that you see that kind of do increase in that area. But you watch his tape and you can just see he's just a natural out there. He just seems so comfortable, so cool and collective. Let me I'll even go into some of his stats. Obviously, last year he won the Heisman. For this year, he had from PFF, he had 91.5 PFF grade, 64.5 passing percentage, 3,325 yards, 32 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 114.4 passer rating, 185 rushing yards, and 4 touchdowns. He uses his legs more than Stroud, but he doesn't use it too much, and that is something that me and you both like, because we want these kind of quarterbacks that are looking more to throw the ball to run, but will absolutely use their legs when it seems the most appropriate to do that. And he's a guy that I think does that, and that's another reason why I really like him. But just not that. I mean, another stat from that I got from PFF was let's see if I find it real quick. He had a 91.3 passing grade just in general, 94.2 intermediate grade, and 95 deep grade, and a 93.2 no pressure grade, and a 67.5 pressure grade. The 95 deep grade is the best in the class, and he doesn't have the biggest arm in the class, but obviously has one of the best accuracy in the class in the long game, and the 67.5 grade under pressure is far and away better than any other prospect in this class, which to me is everything. If you can, I want you to be able to get that deep throw, but I think you should have be able to handle pressure pretty well in the NFL today, obviously, especially, coming from college, you're playing against a lot harder opponents, a lot better athletes and all that stuff. So I think that's going to be really important. So I think that's the reason why, in my opinion, he's by far the best player in the draft. And I think he is the only one, in my opinion, that should go number 1 overall in this class.
Yeah. I mean, and I basically, I believe in my notes I took when watching some of his stuff, I pretty much everything you said, I 100% agree with. I loved his scrambling ability. Yeah. And with, I think with the thing with him too, is a lot of people are going to ask, like, just like we talked about with CJ Stroud and the team he had around him, like, it's Alabama football. Nick Saban,
Right.
probably the best college football coach in college football history.
Right.
Always builds a good team, solid at recruiting, but you could have the best team around you and you still need to have a quarterback that can just go and do it. And he's one of those guys. He's got all the confidence in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said. And I think he's easily going to be the first quarterback taken. But the one, if I had a couple knocks on him, obviously the height's a thing, but I just noticed on his deep ball, I didn't really notice a lot of touch. And also that could just be because of his height, having to kind of push the ball over the top.
Mm-hmm.
But, you talk about the height thing, Drew Brees and Russell Wilson made it work. And how do they make Drew Brees was just a tactician in the pocket, of course, but Russell Wilson made it work by being able to scramble. So
yeah. I know you do have to worry about this frame as well. 194. That's really small.
NFL conditioning, they'll put some muscle on him.
Yeah,
They'll
put some
they'll
muscle
put
on
some
him.
size.
So I don't look into that kind of stuff as much. I'd rather look at tape. I mean, how often do you see, Kenny Pickett, for instance, this year had the smallest hands going into the NFL, and
So
he
did
was
Joe
our
Burrow.
number 1 last year. And a lot of the reason why he was our number 1 last year is because of what we saw in his ability to avoid pressure and innovate and extend plays with his arm. And that's something that we see in Bryce Young too. I would probably say Pickett, based on his tape, his college tape, he would probably be the second best in that area coming into this year. Not saying he's the second best quarterback, but but similar with that. And then obviously Kenny Pickett came in. I mean, he didn't start off going hot. Obviously, as a rookie, starting rookie, but he ended the season looking pretty good and was looking good in the clutch. So I think he's kind of pushed people away from that. He can't play with those small hands.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You can't look into that as much. I don't think. Maybe in some scenarios that it does matter, but it seems less important than not. So
people talk about Joe Burrow's hand size too, and that seems to be going pretty well. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, those are our top 5 quarterbacks in the 2023 NFL draft. We want to know your guys' thoughts and your top 5. Drop those down in the comments section, and we'll see you guys next time on the GG Sports Podcast.
Skol Vikes.